When his young son becomes terrified of the dark, it seems like a common childhood phase, until the chilling origin of his fears comes to light. As a malevolent entity haunts the boy from the shadows, determined to isolate and torment him, can the mother protect her son from its sinister grasp? Will the light be enough to keep darkness at bay? Hit like and subscribe for this spine-tingling tale. It started when my son was around 4 years old. I noticed he had become afraid of the dark, begging me to keep all the lights on when it was bedtime. "Don't turn off the lights, Mommy. He'll come out of the shadows," he would plead. I assumed it was just a normal childhood fear and thought nothing more of it at first. But Harrison's fear intensified over the following weeks. He refused to sleep without every light in his room turned on, from the overhead light to his night light to even fairy lights strung up along his walls. He would wake multiple times a night, crying out for me to come check that all the lights were still on. During the day, he seemed obsessed with the shadows in each room, staring intently at darkened corners and under furniture. When I asked why he was so fixated on the lights and shadows, he said it was because of the monster. According to Harrison, this monster lived in the shadows and would come take him away if the lights ever went out completely. He could sometimes see it moving at the edge of his vision, an inky humanoid silhouette just out of sight. But if he looked directly at it, it would disappear before his eyes. I tried to reason with him, explaining how monsters weren't real and the dark was nothing to fear. But he was utterly convinced. Any time a bulb flickered or went out unexpectedly, he would become hysterical with fear. He began refusing to leave my side, terrified that the monster would take him if he was alone for even a moment without light to keep it at bay. His fear reached a fever pitch one night after a bad storm had knocked out power in our area. I lit some candles in the den where we sat bundled under blankets, waiting for the lights to come back on. But to Harrison, these little pinpricks of flame were no match for the encroaching shadows. Wide-eyed, he pointed toward the darkened hallway. "It's there," he whispered. "It's gonna get me, Mommy." The genuine terror in his small voice chilled me. I pulled him into my lap, wrapping my arms around his shaking body. Slowly his panic subsided as we waited out the blackout together. The next morning, I decided it was time to seek counseling for Harrison. Clearly, the monster was some manifestation of a deeper issue plaguing his young mind. But in the bright light of day, he had little memory of his intense terror the night before. Bad dream was all he could explain. A few days later, Harrison seemed back to his happy self again. When I tucked him in at bedtime, he didn't even ask me to keep the hall light on. Feeling relieved, I hoped this had just been a passing phase, his mind playing tricks on him. Until I woke later that night to blood-curdling screams. Rushing to his room, I found Harrison cowering under his blanket. "It took the lights, Mommy. It made them go out." His nightlight lay shattered on the floor. When I flipped the overhead light on, he gasped and pointed to the far wall. My heart seized in my chest. There, written in childish scrawl, "Go away." The Y trailed downward, streaking the wall as if something had been dragged away mid-sentence. I scooped Harrison into my arms, holding him close as he sobbed. He begged me not to turn the lights off again that night. I just nodded, wide awake now with my own heart pounding. The next day I installed new, high-wattage bulbs in every fixture. Harrison seemed reassured by my efforts to keep the house brightly lit. But I knew this couldn't go on. Whatever was happening here, real or imagined, it was deeply impacting my son. That night after Harrison went to sleep, I sat watching over him in the glow of the new lights. Nothing amiss happened as the hours ticked by, until the first bulb quietly popped and went out. A chill ran through me. Had it burned out on its own, or... Before I could finish the thought, the next bulb flared brightly and exploded. Harrison jerked awake with a cry as we were plunged into darkness. "It's here." His terrified voice cut through the blackness. I leapt up and hit the switch by the door, flooding the room with light once more. My son cowered beneath his blanket, shaking uncontrollably and near hysterics. As I tried to comfort him, I noticed something that turned my blood to ice. A void-black shape crouched in the far corner of his room. It was vaguely human in form, but with long spindly arms and legs jutting out at strange angles. Where its face should be, only inky darkness. This was no figment of Harrison's imagination. The thing standing before me was real. My maternal instincts kicked in. I swept Harrison into my arms and backed us slowly toward the door, keeping myself between him and the shadow creature. Its elongated head shifted slightly as if watching us, but it made no move to attack. The moment we were out of his room, I slammed the door shut. Harrison clung to me, trembling and sobbing as I carried him downstairs. We retreated to the living room where I turned on every light source I could find. I even flipped on the TV for extra illumination. Huddled together on the sofa, we kept the lights on all night. The next morning I called an old friend who knew about spiritual matters, begging her to come over. She arrived that afternoon and I explained everything that had happened. She listened gravely before asking to examine Harrison's room. Upon entering, she froze in the doorway for a long moment. "There's something in here all right," she said under her breath. My heart sank. After burning sage, chanting some words in a language I didn't know, and leaving crystals on the windows, my friend said she cleansed the room of its evil presence. Harrison seemed comforted knowing the monster was gone. But over the next few nights, the activity continued. Lights flickered on their own. Strange noises came from his closet. More chilling messages appeared on the wall. The shadow creature never reappeared directly, but an oppressive darkness lingered. We stopped sleeping upstairs altogether. I even prepared to move us out and sell the house if necessary. But where could we go to truly escape from this entity stalking my son? Wherever we ran, I feared the darkness would follow. Harrison begged me to keep all the lights on every minute of every day and night. It was the only way, he insisted, to keep the monster away for good. And so our house became a defiant glow against the night, never dimming even as neighbors' homes went dark one by one. Inside, every bulb burned bright, chasing away the shadows. And we waited fearfully for the thing in the dark to make its next move. But one thing was certain: when that last light goes out, all will be lost.